So hi everyone. This is Alejandro Primera, and thanks for joining today. We are already starting to record the session. Please mute your line, and at any time you can intervene and ask questions as you may need. Right. So for those that probably haven't joined before, this is part of a series of meetings that we do around Python in particular. These meetings are more tutorials than just philosophical or theoretical discussions on how to execute processes. And we like to probably do a bit of a theoretical introduction, but we try to do as much of show how the things are actually executed in Python in particular for the time being. So this is probably the first one that we go beyond engineering, and we are now incorporating a bit of economics. And these sessions are usually, we handle the sessions or we host the sessions during the weekends. But when we have special guests like Esther today, we obviously accommodate to whatever it's their particular needs on when they can do the presentations. So if anyone is keen to participate, we are open to incorporate more and more contributors. So the sessions are, as usual, are sponsored by Primera Resources and OpenSim, who manages the community and also hosts the repositories in GitHub where we share a lot of the code that we show here in these sessions. And this session in particular was developed in collaboration with RISE Energy Consulting. And just to introduce very quickly a session. First, Esther Escobar will be speaking about economic evaluation. She will be showing an economic model from the North Sea. Esther has a lot of experience, I think over 15 years of experience in economic evaluation. She was a professor at the University of Zulia back in Venezuela for 8 years in economics, and has held business management and finance positions. And I think the last 8 years she has been performing as economic analyst, and most recently senior economic analyst in RPS and LRS Energy, and currently she's a co-founder of RISE Energy. So we're really glad to have Esther in the session and being able to build on top of her knowledge. And I will be doing the Python bit at the end from what I have learned from Esther. So the session today, just to give you an idea, first of all, it's very upfront. It's going to be very theoretical on the economic side, which Esther is going to explain a lot about the premises that are important in the economic evaluation projects. Then we will go into the details of a particular model in an Excel that Esther has been building for this session. We will move into a North Sea example and show some of the cost and production implications. And then towards the end, we'll move into Python, into how to accelerate the decision making into Python by pulling and pushing data from web servers through APIs, and building economic models completely in Python, and also integrating the results back. So without further ado, I think, well, the Python objectives for today, which I usually like to state. First of all, understanding APIs and how we connect to web servers and pull data through from web servers using some credentials. And then we will use a traditional kind of advanced or intermediate pandas functionalities from the pandas library. and then we perform some sensitivities and visualize very quickly using Matplotlib. I think without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to start.
Thank you, Alejandro. I'm going to share my screen. Can you allow me to present? Thank you. Okay, let me start with, first of all, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, depending which part of the world you're based today. And thank you, Alejandro, for the invitation to join this Python session. And thank you for all the people who are connected today. I will try to do this in an hour presentation, and I will then pass that to Alejandro. The main purpose of this presentation is to bring some concepts from the decision-making tools, and this process or these concepts will apply for any decision, for investment decision. So today I prepare a presentation. I will, well, although already Alejandro introduced myself, I will introduce a little bit in a brief, but please have a look at my LinkedIn profile. And then I will move to the interesting part, talking about stating the obvious in economics. I will bring some economics concept behind to understand investment decision. And I will talk about some economics fundamental, which generally pointed to the pricing mechanism, and I will briefly talk about tax implication. When I will apply to all these concepts, we will move to the investment decision tool based on the cash flow as a KPI, and I will bring an economic model based on the UK offshore using fiscal terms. And I will explain the assumptions, inflows, outflows, reporting, and finally my conclusions to bring the rest of the session to Alejandro. Well, a little bit about me. Yeah, Alejandro already is talk about myself, and then at this point, as you say, and Alejandro have said, I am one of the co-founder of Rise Energy Consulting, and I bring the part of economic analysis in the oil and gas industry, and I can bring also expertise in other part of the energy sector. So let's start with some basics, and I think you will hear that is too basic to start with. But to start economic evaluation, one of the things that I think we have to understand, okay, what is energy? And energy in the dictionary is the capacity of doing work. And all our activities are embedded the use of energy. So we have the sun, and we have that the sun provides energy, different sources. We understand and we know that the Earth crust have material with that have energy, that provides energy. So we have that the need or demand of those resources are measured by their energy density. So I don't want to discuss a little bit of this concept of energy density, but let's use this concept because it's useful to move on for economic concepts. And the higher the energy content, the higher the fuel quality. So somehow, some resources are more likely to be used than others based on that energy density. So when some resources are more likely to be used, this process incorporate another concept, which is the concept of preference, the concept of utility. So these become an economic problem, which these energy resources need to be allocated to use in the most optimal process to deliver products and services in short to run economies. So economic as a sign brings some solution, and the most well-known solution is the market theory. So at this point, we're going to talk about two forces in the market theory. So we have agents that are identified and differentiated based on their drivers and desires, and also that they will play a different roles in the market depending on their needs. So now the concept of energy, we have an extra definition. So energy is an essential commodity for production and for the quality or for the improvement of our quality of life. So we talk about agents, economic agents, and from one side of in the market, of the theory of the market, we have agents who identify on one hand about resources. They have the resources, and these economic agents have, and they are willing to trade those resources. From one side, we're talking about the supply curve. On the other side, we have the users or the consumer that provide products and services based on those resources. And that will bring the demand side of the market. So we have now identified economic agents from the supply side and from the demand side. So these two forces come into the energy market to trade their needs. And how these resources are traded at this point, the concept of the commodity will take place. Now is no energy resources anymore. We talk about energy commodities. And these energy commodities will trade, and these two forces will give you or provide a price and a quantity in the energy commodity market. So what is the most well-known energy commodity? Brent. The crude oil is the most international energy commodity, but is very liquid at this point. So we can see how the Brent and the other benchmark price are traded in the market as a spot price. And I'm going to talk about different type of market as well. So, but there is not only this type of energy commodity. We have also the electricity market, and we have other petroleum product markets as an energy commodity. So in this graph, from the demand and supply, and also from the graph of the spot prices, what we can bring here is that each point of price represents the equilibrium price of, or the market clearing price. It's such that the quantity that the suppliers are willing to provide is equal to the quantity that the consumer wishes to obtain. So the energy commodity and commodity market in general are very complex, and we can see how the quantity change from one hand to another, and also there is a monetary exchange. So this is a very simple structure of the market, supply and demand. But the commodity or the energy commodity market is very complex, and we can see one part that the trade quantities, but the other part trade, let's see, contracts. So we move to the structure of the energy market. So we have the physical market and the financial market. The physical market is related to the molecule of the commodity. The players in this market are in charge to produce, transport, and process the molecule and define how is the trade. These trades can be further differentiated in location, like region of hubs, time frames, which it can be daily, monthly, quarterly, type of product. We talk about the molecule itself, natural gas, crude oil, electricity. We talk about nature of the sale. It can be retail or wholesale. But also, we have this financial market, and alongside the physical supply sit the financial market. Financial entities also use paper contracts to speculate without having to assume the responsibility or risk of taking delivery to the energy market, to the physical quantity of this product. So it doesn't assume the responsibility to deliver the molecular. So this financial market is important for two reasons. First, they provide access to the capital need for operations. Second, some natural and some commodities related products are traded in as a derivative as well. And I will explain in the following one how this works. And in addition, we have that financial market is important as it increases the competition and liquidity. So physical market continue to affect the financial market. We can see here an example of the crude oil market with the physical market and the financial market. So we have the market representation in which physical flow of the crude oil and products through the system. The financial market has become an integral part of the system through the oil change. So we have participants in the market that include crude oil producers who seek to sell their products, refineries who buy crude oil and sell refined products. We have physical trading companies who buy and sell crude oil or as well refined products. We have financial entities and industry that need the final products from the refineries. So these two markets are traded and are interlinked. And the crude oil is the most liquid market. So, but this hasn't been the case all the time. The crude oil, or at the beginning of any market, it started with long-term contracts to deliver the commodity. And this is a bilateral, and two parties are in this transaction generally. But the way they have been developed and evolved this market in the crude oil history, we can see that there is layers of products or in the financial market that have emerged through the interlink of these two markets. So we can have here the type of mechanisms that they are using in the market. So we talk about financial and physical market, and there are mechanisms that the price can be clear, the clearance of the price. The most well-known and the most liquid and the first stage for a market or the liquidity of a market is created, starting with the spot cash market. In the crude oil is from 0 to 30 days, usually. And this is usually a bilateral transaction. But then we have what they call long-term transaction of mechanisms. One is over-the-counter and the other is exchange. We know as ICE and NYMEX, all these exchange. So these are different type of contracts. So for the over-the-counter is a bilateral and more standardized and tailored contracts between parties. And usually it's not recorded. It cannot be recorded because it's not in the public domain. On the other hand, we have the exchange, which is it's a standardized contract, and agents, financial agents, or even physical producer can access to this market and trade their products and financial papers. So we can see that these products are traded and they are very complex, but the idea behind is to create transparency at the time of the setup of the price. So in this graph, we can see here, I don't know if you remember the experience in April when prices were behaving for the West Texas Intermediate in a way that we never have seen negative price. So this is a record of the behavior of the West Texas Intermediate against the ICE at the same time, the same day they were trading. It's interesting because the behavior of the driver of each price is different. So because there are different mechanisms and ledgers in the market, and some of the ledgers are not on the public domain, there are what they call specialized agencies that record these trades. And that's why it provides some transparency at the way of the discovery of the price for this commodity. So we have what we call a pricing reporting agency. The pricing reporting agencies are specialized agencies that record those trades that are not in public domain, but are used to assess the final price. So in this case, it's used for many reasons. That's why it's so important when we talk about this pricing reporting agency, because those are the ones behind the final price. And in the crude oil, the most well-known agencies are Platts and Argus. And you will see how many times we can see the price of the data Brent that is published by Platts. This price is used in many places and in many ways for a different reasons. For instance, they can be used to set the price for tax purposes for countries that are oil producers. But also, this price can be used for other situations such as the cost recovery in profit sharing agreement, which is one type of fiscal terms that are used in the oil industry. And it's used in many other situations, and that's why it's so important the fair price of the clarity and the transparency of this, the transparency to discover or to publish this price. But there is a complexity in order to provide this commodity, this benchmark price. So at the end of the day, we're talking about benchmark prices. So we have the most well-known, as I said as well, the one in the US, WTI, and they have some characteristics, and these characteristics to be benchmarked, we can see here that, first of all, has to be very liquid. Second, we have to see that it's not subject to manipulation, and that is interrelated, the liquidity of the product, but also the nature of the players, the amount of players that can have access to that crude. There is an oil price formation process that in the case of data Brent is very complex and clear. And then we have that for a benchmark price to be, for a crude rate to be a benchmark price, he has to relate physical elements and financial layers. So let's move how important is the data brand? So in this graph, you can see, before moving to this, we can see the globe and how much Brent is used to grade other crude. Because data Brent have their own characteristics and is used in many formulas around the world for the final price. So what are the characteristics of the data Brent? Well, I just bring a little bit of some ways of the data Brent pricing mechanism. This data Brent pricing mechanism is based nowadays in 5 grades in the North Sea. And it assessed by different type of contracts and in a different type of financial market. We have the over-the-counter from the Brent forward. We have the data, North Sea data strip. And at the end, all these are assessed by the PRI, the Pricing Reporting Agency. So nowadays, this is a mix of new contracts that are in place to make sure that is transparent and is a fair process pricing, creation of the price. So why we talk about, or why do I bring the conversation of the price? To understand how important is the price for our economic evaluation. And that's why we need to understand some kind of, or somehow, the mechanism behind. For a simple concept of energy and energy density, we can bring all the concepts of the economic market theory and see how important is to set the price and is the way that is traded around the world. Any energy commodity. And we try to bring as well some transparency, and it's a fair market. But we face as well that there is no such a fair market, because the market itself presents some imperfection. Okay? We have the imperfection of the competition, the price distortion, externalities, and the presence of public goods. So in this case, we have that I will talk about externalities. Externalities can be applied when the government decide to tax these commodities, or set a cap price, or subsidize producer. So how they tax these, how they tax what we call this superplus, or this profit from the producer. We talk about the welfare, which is the sum of the consumer superplus and the producer profit, and is there when the tax is applied to this superplus. So we have in this case that the oil and gas sector present high uncertainty linked with the resource development and the high specificity of the investment along the energy change from production and consumption. So for this approach, we bring in here two theorems: the theory of the Ricardian rent and the theory of the Hotelling rent. So these two theories try to specify that there is some rent that has to be taken from the production. In the case of the hoteling, they're talking about, and they add in this production, the issue of the limit of resources, the finiteness of these resources. So in this case, we have that for that reason, companies have to assess their this investment based on what is called the discounted cash flow, to take idea why and how much they are willing to invest in those resources. Taking into consideration that these resources are limited and are going to be substituted. So that's why always when we are talking about petroleum economics, we have to bring here the concept of economic rent and how this economic rent and from which point government should consider to tax this economic rent. In some economists, such as Kim Stephan, they're talking about that in order to keep producing or for the investor to keep the investment in this type of sector, they have to be willing to recover the cost of production, finding oil, and on the development of this asset. Because then, if they are not recovering this, they are not going to keep investing in this type of sectors. And the idea is to apply these taxes at this point when all these costs have been recovered. And most of the time, and Kim applied that this has to be through the net present value of the investor discounted cash flow, because then he cannot keep the willingness to keep investing. So far we can see that there is some issues and why so attractive the energy market, and also how governments try to implement a specific fiscal term for this sector. But the most important tool to consider all the parameters in place for this type of investment is the cash flow.